Okay, well, good evening, everybody. And I'm ready to play a fun concert tonight. This is a concert that I have been thinking about doing for quite a while, and I finally decided I was going to buckle down and practice hard enough that I could do it. And so tonight is a tribute to Walt Disney. And I'm also in hopes that the internet bots that are in control of copyright infringement will not come delete my concert in the middle of the performance. This is because this actually happened during the Old Time Piano Championship last year. One of the contestants was playing Someday My Prince Will Come, and the online bots were so good that they actually detected that song and stopped the internet stream immediately. So I'm in hopes that won't happen tonight because I have practiced hard and this is going to be really fun. You know, most people know me as a ragtime musician. It is a misnomer that that is all I play. I have been frustrated by that for years. I like to think that I am also a specialist in the music of Tin Pan Alley and the Great American Songbook, in which case music from Disney films certainly fits in. And we're going to get things going right away with one of the earliest Disney tunes, written in 1930. This is the original theme song from the Mickey Mouse shorts, which is called Minnie's Yoo-Hoo, and it was composed by a man named Carl Stalling. And there were a lot of really terrific musicians and composers and orchestra leaders that worked for Disney over the years, and I'll try and tell you about some of them, but here to start with is Minnie's Yoo-Hoo. Thank you very much. Perhaps you recognize that tune if you've ever seen the very early black and white Mickey Mouse shorts. That's Minnie's Yoo-Hoo by Carl Stalling. And if you've seen my performances before, I have been playing a medley, a long medley of Disney songs for a number of years. And what I did for this concert is I kind of tried to flesh out the arrangements, extend them, and separate all of the songs so that I could make a whole concert out of it. I'll do many of the songs that were in the medley, but here's one that was not in my original Disney medley. And this is from early on in the history of Disney films, 1933. This is from one of the Silly Symphony cartoons, and this was the biggest hit from all of those films. It's called Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf, which is from the Technicolor cartoon, The Three Little Pigs. And it says, it was written by Frank E. Churchill, who later wrote music for Snow White and Dumbo and other movies. But it says right here on the sheet music, additional lyric by Anne Rennell, who was a wonderful songwriter known for a tune called Willow Weep for Me. And I believe she dated George Gershwin. And that's a little bit of the history behind Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf. It was an enormous hit, and I'm going to play it for you now. Who's afraid of the big bad wolf? Thank you very much. Let me double check all the streams and make sure they're working tonight. Looks like things are. Wow. Already got 85 listeners on YouTube. That's amazing. Well, the next thing that I would like to play for you is very important because this was the first major feature-length movie for Walt Disney, and it was also the first feature-length animated film in history. And of course, I'm talking about Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which came out in 1937. And I have a whole bunch of music here on the piano from Snow White. Initially, Irving Berlin was Walt Disney's music publisher, and then shortly after this movie was made, some of this music was controlled or owned by Bourne Incorporated, and then Walt started his own music company because he realized that he would make more money if he owned the rights to his own songs. But Irving Berlin initially published the songs from Snow White, and I'm going to play a lot of them for you. I'm not going to play them all because I just can't learn every song that there is. I wish I could. But these are some of the best ones. So this is my new medley from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which really I think is one of the most brilliant movies ever made throughout the golden age of Hollywood. Music by Frank Churchill, words by Larry Morey, and we're going to do Hi Ho, Hi Ho, it's off to work we go, and just whistle while you work, someday my prince will come, and then I'm going to end with the love theme from the picture, which is called One Song. very much. Well, there is a bunch of the music from one of Walt Disney's most important pictures, for which he won a number of special Oscars. In 1937, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Thank you, folks. Well, if you're just joining me, I usually make an announcement about this time that I accept virtual tips for these concerts. There should be PayPal and Venmo information in the postings, and I have a P.O. box on my website for checks as well. It's just, it's been very helpful to my career. This is kind of the slow time of year for me, and if you enjoy the music, well, this helps me keep it alive. I really love doing these virtual concerts, and you know, the tips allow me to devote some of my time to the practice and so forth as well. Just had my piano tuned yesterday. I have had some issues with this piano. Apparently it's difficult to tune, and I've been using a new technician from Albuquerque, and unfortunately I had forgotten that the last time he was here he found a small crack in the soundboard in the mid-range of this piano, which could explain some of the issues we've had. But he's a remarkable technician, and so I'm very glad that he's helping me with my concerts. Now let's see what's next on the list. I'm happy to take requests tonight, of course. I imagine many of the songs, the famous Disney songs that you might request, I will be playing anyway. I have a list here, and in fact I'm going to just get right to it and play my next medley of songs, which are all from Disney's next feature-length picture, which came out in 1940, I believe. Yeah, and I think this is my favorite of all of them. I'm talking about Pinocchio, of course. Here's some original sheet music from Pinocchio, and there are many, many wonderful songs in this movie. I'm only going to play 3 of them and make a medley out of it. When You Wish Upon a Star, of course, I believe that won the Academy Award for Best Song in the year 1940. Might have been 41, you know, the Academy Awards take place the next calendar year. Music for Pinocchio was written by Lee Harline, lyrics by Ned Washington. Lee Harline was a gifted songwriter. I think he was a member of the Bohemian Club. When I was playing there in San Francisco with Frederick Hodges, he told me about that. And so the 3 tunes are Give a Little Whistle, and High Diddly Dee, An Actor's Life for Me, which is a march that I just love, and of course, When You Wish Upon a Star. Thank you very much. Well, there's my new medley from Pinocchio. If you've never seen some of the classic Disney movies from back in the 1930s and 40s when all the animation was still done by hand, they really are incredible. And I was reading somewhere, maybe in a book, that there's a group called the Disney Fab Five, which are his first feature-length movies. It's Snow White, Pinocchio, Dumbo, Fantasia, and Bambi. And so I went and I bought all of those movies on Blu-ray discs. And I was just amazed. I went through and watched all of them 3 or 4 years ago. The level of artistry and the music in all of the movies was just incredible. Walt obviously knew the importance of music in his films and in the other aspects of his life, later on Disneyland as well. So, let's see. I saw a request for one of the songs from Mary Poppins. Of course, I'm going to do a few of those at the end. I have never played them. I have never performed them, but I'm preparing that and saving it for the end of the concert tonight. Let's see. Oh, and see, Roger here on YouTube mentioned Cliff Edwards. He was the voice of Jiminy Cricket. Cliff Edwards, also known as Ukulele Ike. He was a big star in the 1920s and 30s, and I just love his work, his voice. It's one of a kind. And speaking of the Disney Fab Five, I'm going to do a couple of songs for you from one of those other movies, which is Dumbo, believe it or not. And, they wrote many songs for those movies in the old days, and not all of them were always published. It's a shame, even if the song was important in the movie. So I searched long and hard on the internet, and I finally found, that Casey Jr., the song about the circus train in Dumbo, was published in England, but never in the United States. So here is the original British copy of Casey Jr. from Dumbo. And let's see. Frank Churchill wrote the music again, words by Ned Washington. Casey Jr., we're going to do this and then follow it up with one of the hits from the film called When I See an Elephant Fly. much. All right, well, there's a couple of tunes from Dumbo. Not songs you hear every day anymore, but I have always loved them. I started collecting Disney sheet music a long time ago, and I've got a lot of the really rare ones. I have the original theme song, Minnie's Yoo-Hoo, and I have a lot of songs from the silly symphonies, the harder to find ones. Yeah, I see some discussion here on YouTube about the Mary Poppins songs. Of course, I'm going to do those at the end of the concert. You know, I had a request not all that long ago to do a little more demonstration of my player piano working, and so I'll try and do that for you now. I just happened to see this piano roll. I'm only going to play one tonight. I saw it sitting on the shelf and I thought, oh, this is perfect for tonight's concert. This is a nice new recut that I bought of a QRS piano roll of a song called Mickey Mouse's Birthday Party. And this is just a pop song that came out about the character Mickey Mouse. It was not really written for a Disney film or by any of the Disney composers, I don't think. And right here on the piano roll, there's little numbers that will, at least with QRS rolls, I'm not sure about other ones. This tells you exactly when it was made, September 1936. So that's about when this song came out. And this is a wonderful hand-played performance by Rudolph Erlebach. Or Earl Lebach. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. He was a very prolific pianist that worked for QRS. So, let's listen to Mickey Mouse's Birthday Party now on this 1913 Apollo player piano. All right, there's Mickey Mouse's Birthday Party. I almost started to laugh. Someone commented, oh my God, Adam is playing with his mind. All right, let's shut that off and continue with the rest of the concert. Let's see. Well, I sort of like to go through music chronologically when I do my concerts. I'm showing the history behind the music and how American music developed over the years. So now we're up to one of the Disney films that came out in 1946. and I'll show you the original sheet music. This is, as far as I am concerned, it is a beloved movie called Song of the South, starring James Baskett is the African-American actor who was became a huge star because of this movie. And I love all of the songs, of course, but I can't play them all. I'm going to do the most famous one, Zippity Doo Dah, which was written by a man named Ali Rubel, words by Ray Gilbert. And I'm going to even play the verse to the tune, which most people don't do very much. There's a quick version. Thank you. Zippity Doo Dah. Well, go ahead and send in some requests for me, folks, because I want to try and do that. I know that I'm going to get requests for music from Mary Poppins, and again, I'm planning to do that as the sort of the finale for tonight's concert. Perhaps one of you will request the song that's up next on my list anyway. I'm checking Facebook too. I'm sorry I've been ignoring Facebook here, folks. Got a lot of viewers on there tonight. That's fantastic. And it seems like people enjoyed the player piano. Oh, I wish I had been able to learn bare necessities in time for tonight's concert. You know, I realized preparing the concert tonight that there is so much wonderful Disney music that I might just want to do a follow-up concert to this as well. It reminds me of when I did the newer pop tunes like from the 70s in my Raggin' the Hits concert. There were so many good ones that, you know what, I thought I should do a follow-up, part 2. Ugly Bug Ball. Yes, I'm going to play that, Michael. Don't worry. Are you planning to do anything from Sleeping Beauty? Yes. Okay, Amy, let me try and get this one for you. In fact, here is some original sheet music sitting on my piano. Big surprise. I like to show the cover artwork, even though you can't see it all that well on the screen. I'm just going to do one of the famous songs from Sleeping Beauty, which is Once Upon a Dream. If you've ever spent time at near the Sleeping Beauty castle at Disneyland or Walt Disney World, you have probably heard this song playing all around you. And now, this was written by Sammy Fain, one of the great Tin Pan Alley composers, but the melody is actually based on a theme by Tchaikovsky. Well, the music says lyrics and music by Sammy Fain and Jack Lawrence. And I noticed that this music was copyrighted in 1952. However, I think the movie Sleeping Beauty didn't come out until 1959. So why that is, I don't know. I'd be interested to find out. Here we go with Once Upon a Dream. very much. Once Upon a Dream. Let me see what's going on over here on Twitch tonight. I haven't checked yet. Oh, got a few viewers. That's fantastic. Got someone offering some kind of promotion here on Twitch. I don't know how that works. Got 126 viewers on YouTube tonight. That's amazing. Thank you, folks. Don't forget to hit the like button on the stream. In each case, I think it helps with the social media algorithms on all the different websites. And let's see. Oh, and subscribe on YouTube and Twitch both if you haven't. I appreciate that if you enjoy the music. I'm sticking mostly to Disney songs tonight and songs from what would be considered the classic Disney period, the golden age of Hollywood, but not strictly, but almost. And we're getting into the 1950s now, and I'm going to play two songs for you that were part of the Disneyland TV show. It was an enormous hit, this series that was all about Davy Crockett. And I'm going to do two songs. Here is the first one. Here's the old sheet music from the Disneyland TV show, 1954 or 55, I believe. And this is kind of fun. There's a family legend that my grandfather was born in a cabin built by Davy Crockett down in Texas. Of course, the Ballad of Davy Crockett was the biggest hit, and there were several hit records on the song. The biggest of all of them was recorded by a really wonderful 50s pop singer named Bill Hayes, or Billy Hayes, who's still living. He went on to be a huge star on Days of Our Lives, and he's a wonderful guy. I've corresponded with him. Got a real nice letter from him a couple of years ago. And so we're going to do first, and I think this song was on the flip side of the Bill Hayes record. It's called Farewell, which is based on some words or a poem that was written by Davy Crockett. Music written by George Bruns, who was one of Disney's great orchestral composers and conductors. So first, a beautiful waltz, Farewell, and then we'll go right into the Ballad of Davy Crockett. there's a quick version of a few songs from Davy Crockett. All right, go ahead and send in some more requests here. Oh, I see a request for music from Bedknobs and Broomsticks. If I had time to practice it, I would do that. I'm playing, oh man, it must be about a dozen songs tonight that I have never played or performed before. So it took me a lot of work to prepare it. But there's going to be more, quite a bit more actually. So let's see. You know, maybe it would be time to start talking about the Sherman Brothers. Let me check both websites here. Oh yeah, I'm going to play It's a Small World. Okay, so I tell you what. There might be a little bit of a story behind this. Forgive me for just talking too much, but one of the greatest thrills that I've had as a musician, personally, outside of perhaps playing at Carnegie Hall, was meeting Richard Sherman, who is one of the Disney legends, an incredible songwriter, and he's part of a very musical family. Of course, the Sherman Brothers worked for Walt Disney throughout the 1960s. That was their most successful period in their career. And their father, many people don't know, was a man named Al Sherman, who was one of the great Tin Pan Alley songwriters. And so I'm going to take a little break here from strictly Disney music, and I'm going to play you some examples of the Al Sherman songs. Now, this goes back to the 1920s, and I'm going to do 3 of Al Sherman's biggest hits. Save Your Sorrow for Tomorrow from 1925, a tune called What Do We Do on a Do-Do-Dooey Day, and then winding up with a song that he wrote in the 1930s that was a big hit for Eddie Cantor. Potatoes are cheaper, tomatoes are cheaper, now's the time to fall in love. It was a hit song of the Great Depression. And oh, how neat. I got a lady listening from Arkansas. Amazing. Well, let's go ahead and now go back to the 1920s and play some music by Al Sherman. very much. That's the music of Al Sherman. I may end up doing several things before the concert's over tonight just to kind of break up the Disney theme, but I'm going to stick pretty closely to it. So now the Sherman Brothers, Richard and Robert, started their songwriting careers in the 1950s, and they wrote, actually their first song was called Gold Can Buy Anything But Love, which was recorded by Gene Autry. I've never been able to find an original copy of the sheet music to that. I would really like to find it. And then I think about 1959 or 1960, they wrote some songs for Annette Funicello that were recorded on Disneyland Records. And so that is how they ended up working for Walt. They got their own office in his studio and wrote for some of the greatest classic movies that were made in the 1960s just before Walt himself died. And I found out that my good friend Ian Whitcomb, who was an old British rock star from the 60s that I knew through the Ragtime music community, I found out that Ian had been friends with Richard Sherman for years. And about 10 or 12 years ago, I asked Ian to call him up, and he called him up, and I got to go over to Richard's house in Beverly Hills, and I played for Richard on the piano that he wrote the songs for Mary Poppins on. And there's this little statue of Walt and Mickey Mouse, and Richard sitting right beside me. It was quite an experience, and Frederick Hodges went with me, and the two of us went to visit him, and Richard was so nice. He's very friendly. Robert was still living at the time. He lived in London later on in his life. I did not get to meet him. In fact, I think he died 6 months or a year after I met Richard. And so we played for Richard. I played some of his dad's songs and asked him a lot about his dad too. I think maybe he kind of enjoyed that. And then right as we were leaving, Frederick got a picture for me with Richard and his Oscars from Mary Poppins, which were on the mantle of the fireplace. We were leaving the house, and I ran to the car to get the camera and went back, and boy, I'm so glad I did that now. Richard has to be about 95 now. He's still living and doing well and is active as far as I know. Let's see. No, Kathy, afraid I don't know Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo. Don't know that one, but I am going to do a couple of the songs that the Sherman Brothers wrote for rides at Disneyland now, not from movies. And these are the two most famous ones. They were actually written for these two rides which were created for the New York World's Fair in 1963 or 64. And then later, these attractions were brought to Disneyland. One of them was then moved years later to Disney World in Orlando, Florida. That's the Carousel of Progress, which I love. So we're going to do the theme song from that. There's a Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow, and of course, It's a Small World. Those are the two songs that I asked Richard to autograph for me that day. I had him sign one of his dad's songs as well. Maybe I'll tell you more about what I talked about with Richard here in a minute. But for now, here are two of the Sherman Brothers' most famous songs, both from Disneyland. There's a Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow, and It's a Small World. thank you very much. Well, there's a couple of songs by the Sherman Brothers. I told you about meeting him, but I don't suppose I really mentioned why I like his music so much. He's quite possibly my favorite living songwriter. I talk about Richard. I'm sure Robert was equally responsible for many of these songs. I believe Richard wrote most of the music. Robert was primarily the lyricist, but I could be wrong about that. Anyhow, I think their music was heavily influenced by their father. You know, it's the same sort of simple Tin Pan Alley style melodies that their dad wrote back in the 1920s, and the Sherman Brothers music really fits the ragtime style that I love so much very, very well. And, oh, hello, Penny in Baltimore. Miss you very much. Oh, Akimi, isn't that interesting that you learned It's a Small World in Japanese when you were growing up? Yeah. Well, when I met Richard, he said that song is a cry for world peace, and it's certainly a melody that is loved all over the world. In fact, many of the Sherman Brothers songs are. Leo, if that's true, that is fascinating. I had no idea. I'll have to look at the sheet music and see if I think it's just a coincidence or if that's accurate. He says, it's a world of laughter, a world of tears. That part of the melody was from a ragtime era march called the Jolly Coppersmith. Well, I have the Jolly Coppersmith. I think it was one of the E.T. Paul publications. I have never heard about that in all the years I've been playing that song. It's a Small World. Oh, how special. Carl, thank you. I'm just reading here on YouTube. He says, looks like you've hit 200 viewers on your 3 platforms. Congratulations. Oh my goodness. That is amazing. Well, I thought the Disney music might be quite popular, and I'm very grateful for that. If you enjoy the music, I accept virtual tips for these concerts. All you have to do is send in a tip on PayPal or Venmo. The information is in the postings, and there's a P.O. box on my website for checks, as well as a whole bunch of the CDs I've recorded over the years. You can get all those directly on my own website, and no obligation, but I'm grateful to all of you. Now, back to the Sherman Brothers. I chose to learn a song this week to play for you that is very cute, and one of the reasons I wanted to do it is because it's very much in a ragtime style. I have become a big fan, always was, but even more so recently, of Hayley Mills. So the Sherman Brothers wrote the music for almost all of her movies that she made in the 60s for Disney, and a lot of them were ragtime era movies, including this one, which was called Summer Magic. It starred Hayley Mills and Burl Ives, and the sheet music from Summer Magic was published in the United States. I finally won the music in an auction, and the cover artwork is terrible. So I'm going to show you the British copy. Sometimes the British music has better cover artwork than the American publications. So here is The Ugly Bug Ball by the Sherman Brothers from Summer Magic. And if you look on the inside of the music, it says right at the top of the score, medium ragtime tempo. Thank you very much. That's The Ugly Bug Ball, sung by Burl Ives in the Disney movie Summer Magic. The Sherman Brothers songs are so terrific. I like the fact that Richard and Robert didn't use modern rock and roll style harmonies. Of course, they did write rock and roll songs like Let's Get Together for Haley Mills and the Parent Trap, but it's just very high quality stuff, and I've been collecting their sheet music. It's actually quite hard to find because by the 1960s, not as many people were playing the piano, and so it can be quite collectible. Now, let's see what's next on the list. Oh, well, yes, I'd sure love to meet Haley Mills. I've been planning to write her a letter and trying to get her to autograph a picture for me. You know, relatively speaking, of the stars that were in such classic movies, she's one of the younger ones still around. Now, I'm going to move some of this music. Gotta move it all. And I think it is time for my Mary Poppins medley. Printed off all the music and put it in a binder so it would be easier to turn pages. And this is not going to be all the songs from the movie, but it's going to be most of the famous ones. There were a whole lot of songs in the movie. Richard told me he wrote 20 songs for the movie, and the day that we met, he played a snippet from the song, the Snake Charmer song from the Jungle Book. And he said that originally that melody was written for Mary Poppins, and it was reused later on for Jungle Book. Now, anyway, I'm going to go through and tell you the names of all the songs. We're going to do A Spoonful of Sugar, Jolly Holiday, Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, Feed the Birds, which is a beautiful waltz, and Chim Chim Tree, which is the song for which Richard was awarded the Academy Award for Best Song in 1963, and then wind up with Let's Go Fly a Kite. There is a documentary about the Sherman Brothers, which tells a lot of the history behind their music, but in case you don't know, I think Spoonful of Sugar was inspired by a real event in the Sherman family, and also, Let's Go Fly a Kite, the song at the end of the movie Mary Poppins, was inspired by something that their dad, Al Sherman, used to do, flying kites, something like that. And Feed the Birds was Walt Disney's favorite song, Walt himself. I think that's an interesting bit of trivia. So let's see if I can do it. Here is my new medley from one of the greatest of all Disney pictures, Mary Poppins. much. All right, I did it. There is my new Mary Poppins medley. One of the great musicals in American history. I didn't mention that a lot of the songs, and I discussed this with Richard when I met him, a lot of the songs were written in the old-time English music hall style, since it is a movie set in Great Britain during the early 1900s. And Richard obviously is a very knowledgeable musician, since he knew about English music hall, which is kind of like American vaudeville. And I have already done an entire concert devoted to English music hall. I think it's called Across the Pond, and you can still watch the whole concert on my YouTube channel. Well, I'm going to have some time to kill here at the end of the concert without, breaking the Disney theme too much. I might end a little bit early, I'm not sure. But go ahead and send any last-minute requests in tonight. Hopefully I've covered a lot of them. Yes, very much enjoyed your stories about the Sherman Brothers. Oh, well, thank you, Natalie. Let me check all the websites. Marilyn says, yes, I made it this far without copyright bots getting me. Frankly, I thought they might, but I'm glad that they haven't. Oh, I wish I could have learned one from the Aristocats, too. That would have been great. Someone mentioned that on Twitch. It's, there's only so much time in the day, and there's so many good songs. I'll just have to do a Disney concert part 2 sometime in the future. Don't know anything from Alice in Wonderland. And for Sleeping Beauty, I already did Once Upon a Dream. I have one or two, two songs left that sort of fit the Disney theme that I want to play for you. Unless I get anything else. No, I don't know You've Got a Friend in Me, and I don't know The Little Mermaid. They're good songs, but I stick more to the ones from the old days. How about Winnie the Pooh? I wish I could play that for you too. Sherman Brothers wrote those songs, and I probably shouldn't mention it in public here online, but I was very frustrated. The original sheet music for these songs from the 1960s, these pop songs, is quite collectible, and some of them are very rare and hard to find. Now, I could get a reprint easily, I know that, but I wanted the original copy of the song, the title song from Winnie the Pooh, and it showed up on eBay a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. I bid a lot of money and lost it for over $400. The original title song from Winnie the Pooh is so collectible. In the 1960s, relatively speaking, was not that long ago. It went for over $400 on eBay, and I've never seen another copy. I'm frustrated about that years later. Well, I'll tell you what I want to do next. We're going to depart from the films, depart from Disney. I don't know anything from 101 Dalmatians either. I'm very fortunate that over the years I've become very good friends with the man that I would humbly consider the best piano player that they ever had at Disneyland, Rod Miller. And I never got to meet him until after he had already retired, but Rod and I talk on the phone quite a lot. He's still doing well. And I'm going to play for you an old 1920s ballad of sorts that I was inspired to start playing after hearing Rod play it. He played it often, and Rod gave me some wonderful videos of himself playing at Disneyland back in the 1990s, early 90s, when he was really in his prime. And this is the tune that he starts with. You can watch the videos on my YouTube channel. There's 2 hours of video footage. It looks like he had so much fun when he worked there. And so the tune is It Had to Be You. Most people play it kind of slow, like a ballad, but Rod plays it real up-tempo, and I like it that way. Here's It Had to Be You in the style of Rod Miller. Thank you very much. It had to be you. Just like Chico Marx. Well, I stole that from Rod Miller. I suppose he got it from Chico Marx. I see requests for Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. I thought about playing that tonight. First of all, it's not Disney, and the real reason is I didn't have time to practice it. So I think I'm going to skip that one just to be on the safe side. I'm proud of the concert, the way it went tonight as it is, and I'm not going to screw that up. But I'm going to play one more thing for you and probably close the concert as it is, which this is a great discovery in the world of ragtime music. It was only just discovered last year, at the end of last year, and its original manuscripts of the earliest known syncopated ragtime music from 1792. And the name on the music is something like Beethoven, I think. Yes, it was Beethoven. It was very hard to read. This music has come to my attention, and I'm going to play it for you now. It's a very serious and long-winded composition, and it's entitled L'Ouverture de la Grande Rodent. Well, thank you very much, folks. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's concert. It was a lot of fun. I know there's some more songs I should have thrown in there, but I'm going to just have to do this again. If you have enjoyed the music, I do appreciate those virtual tips. It helps me a lot with my career, and I know who many of you regular tippers are. I'm very grateful. And I bet I've got a lot of new viewers tonight, so please join me next Sunday night for another virtual concert. I'm not 100% sure what the theme will be. I think the week after next is close to Valentine's Day, so I'll probably do a Valentine's Day concert. And I will announce next week's on Facebook like I always do. Thanks so much for joining me tonight, folks. I'll see you next week on Sunday night.